Press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update.
Major breeding areas and breeding islands are shown as dark green areas or darts. Open darts show no breeding records on islands, and are also used for offshore sightings, that is from ships or boats. Other areas where species is not meant to be seen are plain pale green, with pale green hatching where records are usually sparse. The elephant is the largest living land mammal. During evolution, its skeleton has greatly altered from the usual mammal design for two main reasons. One is to cope with the great weight of huge grinding cheek teeth and elongated tusk teeth, making the skull particularly massive. The other is to support the enormous bulk of such a huge body. Botanic gardens are scientific and cultural institutions established to collect, study, exchange and display plants for research and for the education and enjoyment of the public. There are major botanic gardens in each capital city. Zoological parks and aquariums are primarily engaged in the breeding, preservation, and display of native and exotic fauna in captivity. Charles Darwin published his paper on the origin of species in 1859. It is one of the most well-known pieces of scientific literature in human history. In the paper, Darwin proposes the theory of natural selection. He states that for any generation of any species, there will always be a struggle for survival. Individuals who are better suited to the environment are fitter, and therefore have a much higher chance of surviving and reproducing. This means that later generations are likely to inherit these stronger genetic traits. Such cross-protection is usually seen between two animals. But Gore studies the same sort of mutualism in microbes. He and his team demonstrated the first experimental example of that cross-protective relationship in drug-resistant microbes, using two strains of antibiotic-resistant E. coli bacteria, one resistant to ampicillin, the other to chloramphenicol. It's not that human activities didn't impact wildlife at all, of course. Heavily hunted species, like white-tailed deer, gray squirrels, and raccoons, were photographed somewhat less often in hunted areas. Coyotes showed up more often in hunted areas. While most species didn't avoid hiking trails, the predators actually preferred them. Shrimp farmers used to hold animals in nursery ponds for 30 to 60 days, now they try to move them into grow-out ponds in less than 30 days. This reduces stress on the animals and dramatically increases survivals in the grow-out ponds. Many farms that abandon nursery ponds have gone back to them, and the results have been surprisingly positive. They're using the old, uncovered, earthen, nursery ponds. Usually, age is determined by physical characteristics, such as teeth or bones. Great, if you have a body. Researchers have tried unsuccessfully to use blood. But in this study, the scientists used immune cells, called T cells. T cells recognize invaders through receptors that match molecules on bacteria, viruses, even tumors. The cellular activity that produces these receptors also produces a type of circular DNA molecule as a byproduct. Delone and MacLean's model has been criticized by some authors. Indeed, this model is specific to contexts of voluntary use of information technology. The usage variable remains a success variable of information systems if the user himself decides to adopt or reject the technology. However, for mandatory uses, such as for ERP systems, the use of the technology is obvious. The success of information systems cannot, therefore, be measured by usage. The researchers think that long-distance flyers such as the American golden plover and the white-rumped sandpiper picked up the spores while lining their nests. Then when the birds arrive in new places they molt, leaving behind the feathers and their precious cargo to start growing again at the other end of the world. The initial thud comes from when those dorsal bursae collide. And the reverberation results from the vibrations that linger when the tissues pull apart. But though the younger says the bursae have to be somewhat sticky for the clapping together and snapping apart to produce a noise with the correct loudness and pitch. That stickiness comes courtesy of the mucus. The caterpillars that feed on trees are trying to match the hatching of their eggs to the timing of budburst. The caterpillars want to feed on the juiciest and least chemically protected leaves. And it's not just the caterpillars, of course, that are important. But the knock-on effect is on nesting birds, which are also trying to hatch their chicks at the same time that there's the maximum number of caterpillars. While killing gorillas is already illegal in the country, declaring the subspecies as critically endangered would probably bring more funding and support for saving it. Protecting the entirety of the gorilla 700 square mile territory would no doubt prove impossible, but Dr. Plumptre and his colleagues are talking with the government and community leaders about establishing 2 new protected areas that would encompass 60% of the remaining gorilla's habitat. Modern buildings have to achieve certain performance requirements, at least to satisfy those of building codes, to provide a safe, healthy, and comfortable environment. However, these conditioned environments demand resources in energy and materials, which are both limited in supply, to build and operate. Free trade is an economic policy under which the government does not interfere with trade. No tariffs are applied to imports or exports, and people are allowed to trade goods and services as they please. Supply and demand dictates the prices for which goods and services sell and are the only factors that determine how resources are allocated in society. As to the Industrial Revolution, one cannot dispute today the fact that it has succeeded in inaugurating in a number of countries a level of mass prosperity which was undreamt of in the days preceding the Industrial Revolution. But, on the immediate impact of Industrial Revolution, there were substantial divergences among writers. At the beginning of each fiscal year, funds are allocated to each state account in accordance with the university's financial plan. Funds are allocated to each account by object of expenditure. Account managers are responsible for ensuring that adequate funds are available in the appropriate object before initiating transactions to use the funds. Weakness in electronics, auto, and gas station sales dragged down overall retail sales last month, but excluding those three categories, retailers enjoyed healthy increases across the board, according to government figures released Wednesday. Moreover, December sales numbers were also advised higher. Tesla's theoretical work formed the basis of modern alternating current electric power systems. Thomas Edison promised him almost $1 million in today's money to undertake motor and generator improvement. However, when Tesla ethical serbs asked about the money, Edison reportedly replied, "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor." The pair becomes arch rivals. For diplomacy, the starting point must be that globalization requires bridges and removes barriers. A policy of containment is a difficult strategy in the age of the fiber optic cable, the jumbo jet, and the satellite dish. There will always be the exception, such as the murderous regime in Iraq, where the only safe strategy is to keep it in the isolation ward until it accepts the norms of international behavior, or the military dictatorship in Burma, which has persistently failed to respond to dialogue. It takes two to critically engage. Many people believe that employers discriminate against older people because youths have more energy and creativity. This is not true. The main reason for hiring younger workers is payroll. In most countries, your salary is dependent on how many years of work experience you have. It is far more cost-efficient to hire postgraduates, fresh out of university, than senior staff with over 20 years of industry knowledge. Analysts were impressed by the improvement in margins reported across all regions, apart from the United Kingdom, and said that this reflected a clear effort to improve profitability across the business. Although the turnaround is still in its early stages and the valuation looks full, given the challenge of turning around such a large and complex business, this is certainly an impressive start. Trade unions originated in Europe during the Industrial Revolution. Because of the machinery that had become commonplace, skilled labor became less in demand, so employers had nearly all of the bargaining power. Employers mistreated the workers and paid them too little for the work they did. Trade unions were organized that would help in the improvement of working conditions. A hazard assessment should be performed for work involving distillations of organic liquids and should thoroughly address issues relating to residual water and possible decomposition of the solvent in question, as well as the physical placement of the distillation apparatus and heating equipment to be employed. The next wave of leaders in industrial manufacturing will build an ecosystem that capitalizes on the promise of analytics and connectivity to maximize efficiency for themselves and their customers. They will map out their strategies and prioritize measures that will bring the most value to their business, starting now with pilot projects, and building greater strengths in data analytics with cross-functional teams of experts. Companies will want to be known not just for the financial results they generate, but equally for the imprint they leave on society as a whole. First, ensuring that their products contribute positively. Second, operating in a way that approaches a net neutral impact to the natural environment. And third, cherishing their people. The Ford Company provides plenty of opportunities for its employees. It guarantees not only comfortable and appropriate working conditions, but also many other advantages. Therefore, becoming a part of the Ford Motor Company is always profitable and beneficial. Moreover, it is important to mention that Ford Motors provides its employees with effective and useful services and takes care of their well-being. The free market is extremely competitive and companies are constantly trying to gain an edge over their rivals. Merchandising and brand image play a major role in attracting customers, but they often lead to overpackaging. This is a serious problem since most packaging these days are made of plastics, which are not biodegradable. Some people blame the manufacturers for their blatant disregard, while others point the finger at consumers. A university is not a business. More precisely, a not-for-profit college or university is significantly different than a for-profit business. A university has no owners, it is a public trust. Without owners, it has no one to pay dividends to, and no one for whom it must maximize its profits. A business has a single overriding goal, the maximization of return for the owners. A university has a multiplicity of goals: to foster learning, to create knowledge, and to serve its community. In this landmark account, first published over 20 years ago, the author argues that the ignorance and lethargy of the poor are direct results of the whole situation of economic, social, and political domination. By being kept in a situation in which critical awareness and response are practically impossible, the disadvantaged are kept submerged. Clearly, times are changing, and while many people are saving for their retirement, many more still need to do so. Most countries have a range of pension schemes that are designed to provide individuals with an income once they stop working. People need to take advantage of these if they are to have sufficient money throughout their retirement years. Statistics reflect vital information about the economy, the well-being of the population, and the environment. Society relies on statistics being visible, accessible, and robust, and on statistically literate people making the best use of the information to determine future action. Statistical literacy, then, is the ability to accurately understand, interpret, and evaluate the data that inform these issues. The principle of cooperation is one of the things that sets conversation apart from similar activities such as lectures, debates, arguments, and meetings. Other qualities which help to define conversation include the equal distribution of speaker rights, mutual respect among speakers, spontaneity and informality, and a non-businesslike environment. Most peasants remained self-sufficient and skeptical about money, and with good reason. The triumph of capitalism probably made them worse off. They now had to deal with a centralized imperial state that was collecting tax more efficiently, giving more power to landlords, and slowly reducing customary peasant rights to land and produce. The Japanese tea ceremony is a ritual tour influenced by Buddhism in which green tea is prepared and served to a small group of guests in a peaceful setting. The ceremony can take as long as 4 hours, and there are many traditional gestures that both the server and the guest must perform. In comparing material with non-material culture, the first being the objects and technologies we create, and the second our customs, beliefs, and attitudes, the speaker gives greater emphasis to the material culture. He gives the example of the development of genetic science and the benefits it has brought to mankind, despite a fair amount of opposition. Legal writing is usually less discursive than writing in other humanities subjects, and precision is more important than variety. Sentence structures should not be too complex. It is usually unnecessary to make extensive use of adjectives or adverbs, and consistency of terms is often required. Public demand for education has remained strong, reflecting the importance of education as a means of social progress. Aware of the added value of education to the world of work, the government continues to innovate and update the education system in order to produce a qualified and competent workforce. For the executive students on the march, the work-life balance issue would have already seemed very real. While it is tough enough balancing professional life with family and friendships, having to study at the same time puts executive MBA students under even more pressure than their full-time counterparts. Australians do speak English, however, for some tourists and travelers, it can be difficult to understand the slang. Also, the links between Australian and American English were seen to be tenuous. At least some colloquialisms in Australian English do not exist in other types of English. Written examinations are a fact of life for most high school and university students. However, recent studies have shown that this traditional form of assessment may not be an accurate indicator of academic performance. Tests have shown that many students experience anxiety during exam weeks, which leads to poor results. As a result, some learning institutions are replacing exams with alternative assessments, such as group work and oral presentations. Competence in mathematics was another trouble spot. More than half said their real task, school's graduates are deficient in mathematics. More than 10% of respondents and said college's graduates are deficient in the subject, while 70% said they are adequate. The Southerners did not accept Lincoln as a president because of certain reasons, based on historical grounds. Southerners wished to protect their rights in the government and become more independent from the North. They considered president elections to be unfair. Moreover, they thought that their own rights will be ignored and limited. All this caused the separation of the Southern states and marked the beginning of the Civil War. The coevolutionary relationship between cows and grass is one of nature's underappreciated wonders. It also happens to be the key to understanding just about everything about modern meat. For the grasses, which have evolved to withstand the grazing of ruminants, the cow maintains and expands their habitat by preventing trees and shrubs from gaining a foothold and hogging the sunlight. The animal also spreads grass seed, plants it with his hooves, and then fertilizes it with his manure. Investigators also compared those microbes with those living in 52 other soil samples, taken from all around the planet. The park had organisms that also exist in deserts, frozen tundra, forests, rainforests, and prairies. Antarctica was the only area that had microbes that did not overlap with those found in Central Park. Only a small percentage of the park's microbes were found to be already listed in databases. In an attempt to lure new students, leading business schools, including Harvard, Stanford, the University of Chicago and Wharton, have moved away from the unofficial missions and prerequisite of 4 years' work experience and instead have set their sights on recent college graduates and so-called early career professionals with only a couple years of work under their belt. The coastal wetlands have environmental and economic importance. Wetlands provide natural wealth. They have important filtering capabilities. As the runoff water passes, they retain excess nutrients and some pollutants. They maintain water flow during dry periods. Thousands of people depend on groundwater for drinking. They act as natural sponges of flood waters and contain soil erosion. They control floods and save the buildings from collapsing during heavy rains. The hardwood riparian wetlands along the Mississippi River can store 60 days of floodwater. Such an agreement would include recognition that the world must aim as soon as possible to hold global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, a long-term low-carbon future, 5-year updated action plans that recognize the developing climate reality, and aid to those countries that did little to cause climate change but are most at risk from it. Kinderman says he thinks the compound could be a win-win for the planet and the animals. You know, the methane is kind of a waste product. And this energy, instead of losing it for the animal, it can be reused for the animal in terms of performance, and at the same time we are doing something for greenhouse gas emission and climate change. The product's not on the market yet, toxicology tests are ongoing. Investigators also compared those microbes with those living in 52 other soil samples taken from all around the planet. The park had organisms that also exist in deserts, frozen tundra, forests, rainforests, and prairies. Antarctica was the only area that had microbes that did not overlap with those found in Central Park. Only a small percentage of the park's microbes were found to be already listed in databases.